Hello everybody and welcome to this new HelloID webinar. In this webinar we're going to describe some new functionality that we have in HelloID. And normally we only do the new functionality of the latest release, so the November release. But we want to do a little bit of a different webinar this time. And here I'm going to discuss a larger feature, in this case the new PowerShell target connector for provisioning. And we want to see if that is a better option to sometimes have a webinar where we discuss a larger topic like PowerShell target system or person aggregation that we had in the past, or things like that, which are a larger set of features, and discuss those, or that we still want to have the old one webinars where we show all the new features of the release. Don't forget, you can also see all the new features, of course, inside the product release videos. They will explain the new features as well, but sometimes it's on a lower level and more quickly. This is more detailed, but we think it's a better option to focus on big portions of features, which we want to discuss in the webinar. But please, after this webinar, just check it out, and if you like it, say I want this this way of webinars. Else, please go back to the previous ones where we show all the new features of the release. You can comment on that, and we will make a decision based on your feedback, of course. So please put it in the comments or in the chat. That's also an option, of course. So let's start. So with this webinar, we're going to discuss the new PowerShell target inside provisioning. So we're focusing on that because it has a lot of new functionality, and I think before getting to this state, it was for 5 releases in beta, and we added some new functionality. So everything we already shown and discussed, but I think it's good to have a big picture overview of what's new inside the connector. So let's start. So I'm currently not logged in into HelloID, so let me log in HelloID, and let's go to provisioning, of course, and because it's a new target PowerShell connector in provisioning. Before I start this whole presentation, I also want to mention that I've scheduled this presentation in our webinar into 2 sections. First off, I'm going to explain the more basic functionality of the new PowerShell connector, and also what's new against the current one that we currently have. And in the second part, I'm going to more the detailed stuff, so more explaining why we changed something, or eventually not the functional stuff, but more the technical details. Could be that there are some scripting involved. So if you really want to know more about the basic functionality of the new features, then just check out the first part. If you want more detail, check also the second part. But I would still watch the first part because they match, of course. So as I mentioned, we have a new target system type. So if I go to target systems and I click on new, we have the new PowerShell option. Those are still the same, but the black one is the new one. The old PowerShell target system will disappear in a while. We still have it, it's still compatible. We still do some bug fixes and things like that for it. But eventually we need to go to the new PowerShell target system. And it's also needed for new features and new functionality in the future. So we're only going to make the new features and functionalities for the new PowerShell target system. If we open the new PowerShell system, I've created here a system for the AD Azure guest accounts. And the first thing that you can see what is differently than the previous one is that you now have a tab fields. And this is a really important one because with these fields I can create a mapping between my vault persons and my target system. And essentially it's the same like on the source side, where you have a source system and you have a mapping and then to the person fields, but just the other way around, of course. So with this I can say I have a field department inside my target account or target system for an account, and I can say, okay, how I'm going to supply my data for it from the person field perspective. So let me go into the edit, and you see a couple of things here. So first off, you have the name of the field, you have the type of the field, so you have an option between a text and an array. So if you want to send something like email addresses, you can use an array type. I will go into more detail in that inside in the second part. But those are the options. You can add a description to maybe why do you want to use this field inside your target system or something like that. And you can have multiple configurations of your actions and how it's mapped between your person field and the target system. So in this case, I only have this mapping for the create and the update actions. So when we create an account and when we update an account, these fields are set. So in this case, only the department is set. For this, I have a couple of options, just like we had in Active Directory. We have and also in the source, of course, we have a fixed, field, and complex, and a none. A none I will explain a little bit later. A fixed means just a normal text field. Field means I can select a field from a person, like I did here. So the primary contract and department and display name is automatically set. And I can use complex. And complex means I can use JavaScript to take multiple fields from the person, do some changes and stuff like that. Trimming, and maybe make something a capital or a dots or something like that. So I have a couple of options there. What I can also do is, let's say I want to use, for creating the update, the department I just want to use this, the display name of the department. But I can also add a second configuration where I can set my other actions and I can use a different mapping. So here I can maybe say, okay, let's say only enabled. So let's say I want to enable by HelloID. And I can create another configuration, and I want to say here is, I have to say fixed, of course, disabled by HelloID. Let's do something like that. In the department field, maybe it's a bit strange. Normally you do something in the description, but this is possible, no problem. What I can do here is person preview. Oh, sorry. Why are there no... Yes, sorry, person preview, I have to select the person, of course. And here I can say, on department, my preview value is administration. But of course, I can also see that it's only selected for the action create. But if I go to enable, and I run it again, it's enabled by HelloID. So here I can check my preview state for certain different type of actions. So that's also pretty new, because normally in Active Directory we only had that we could see the preview for the create and the update, and you can only use one mapping for those. But here we can define it for each action, and of course we made it like this, so you can also say if the mapping is the same for all the actions, you can just have one configuration, which makes it a little bit easier to maintain, but you also have the flexibility to create different configurations. So that's really nice, I think. Another thing is we can also say store in account data. So that means is that we store this value on these actions on the person.accounts value. If I go to persons and look here and I see accounts, this person has account data. You can see here that this is the account data. So you can save this value on the person, and you can use it in another system or in notification or things like that, or in other parts. So that's pretty easy to do. Just map it and just say, okay, I want to store it, and it will be automatically stored here for that particular action. If we go back with the fields and we go back to department, another one of these options are used in notification. I will go into more detail later on about this, but this means is that this field, you can use it in your notification as a suggestion, and you can trigger it in an email or other systems like MessageBird or something like that, Twilio, things like that. But we can also do some conditional custom events for notification stuff on it, but I will discuss it later on to make it more clear. So those are most of the field options. Like I said, you can just also do an auto run preview. Will automatically be refreshed based on your action selection. So sometimes some people prefer this one as an auto change, but the other ones like to hit the refresh button so they can see the change more easily, because if something has changed, this will automatically change as well, and that can be difficult to see. So with this, you have a good understanding on how you can configure your mapping for your target system. And also in the overview, you can easily see the department is used in these actions, in these 4, and it's not used in the delete action. The display name is only on the create and the update. And you can also see any options that are enabled. So for external ID, I can use this in my notification, but only on the enable, disable, and delete actions. Of course, I can also create new fields. So let's say I want to add a new field. And let's say I want to use email addresses. Well, let me disable the auto run preview, because that's quite annoying if you have it enabled and you don't have to set up everything correctly. But let's say email addresses, and in this case I say it's an array and not a text because it's multiple values. Also, I can select store and account data, but if I want to click on using notifications, it's not possible. And this is because the type of array is not supported in notification or in the conditional notification events. So only if you select text here, you will have that option. So let's keep it for text for now and say, okay, using notification. I want to say it's for me it's field currently, and let's say it's the external ID, or no, maybe let's say email, primary contact personal business email. So now I've created my own little mapping, and I can press on preview, and sorry, field is not. If I close it, it will be renamed. There are 2 email addresses, and here you see my preview value, just like I configured before. And I configured for the create and the update, and with the options for notification and for storing it in account data. So that's pretty easy. Like I said, we also have different other options. Sometimes in the case of let's say a department, you will have a department name or a department ID, something like that. But sometimes you also have that with title, or there's just a system that needs some kind of object with multiple attributes. And we support it as well. So we can do something like, let's say I want to send a function, put title, function name. Let's say it's fixed test. And then I'm going to close it, so I have function.name, and I can add another field, like say function.id, and also fixed test as well. With this, I have 2 fields, function.name and function.id. They will be sent to my scripting as one object. I will not discuss this now, but I will discuss this later in part 2. But sometimes this is needed for the configuration of a target connector. So therefore we have that option, which is I think nice. I think those are the all the options of the mapping. And then another thing that is new in this, let me check if there are any questions before I continue. No, I don't see any questions. Please, if you have questions about the new functionality, please ask them in the chat, and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. And I think that's also really helpful. Then we can check where there are some misinformation or something is not clear or something like that. So the fields, we covered that one. Also a new functionality is correlation that we currently have. And here it's possible to enable correlation, and you can say, okay, the person field, let's say external ID. So the person external ID should be the same as the external ID of the target system, or maybe let's say I think we have a username, maybe the username. This in itself doesn't do anything, but with all the PowerShell and all the connector, it's easier for a customer or maybe a system administrator to configure the correlation if the connector is supporting it. Of course, that's also a limitation. But with this, we make it easier to configure the correlation inside the UI. Also, the correlation will be used in some future functionality features. And that's also the reason why we didn't add the correlation report. It will be all clear, and I think in the next couple of months, maybe next Q1 of 2004, I think. But there is a reason why we didn't include a correlation report just like we had in Active Directory. But something like that will be coming back, but then we have support for all the systems, based if correlation, of course, is possible for the system. But this is the correlation configuration. How it's used inside the scripting I will explain in part 2. But you know that there is a correlation part to configure. Also on account we have a new functionality, and of course we already have the same functionality in the previous one, where you can say, okay, this system is dependent on the other system, so if an account is created, the other system is created first. We can have custom connector configuration where we can address a UI for API keys and things like that. It's all the same. That's all the same functionality that we have. But here we also have a different one, and that's with the uniqueness validation. We never had that before, but now we can enable a separate uniqueness check. And we can do it for an action, so we can configure, okay, we want to do a uniqueness check only on the create, or we want to do it on the create and update as an example. And with this you can have a script which is fired to check if the fields that are in the mapping are unique. So the script should simply just send back the fields that are not unique, and then an iteration inside the field is started. So if you go back to a field, and as an example, we go to username, and we go to the complex mapping. Sorry, a little bit of scripting here. You see here an iteration field, and that number is increased. So the first iteration is, let's do a preview. So Albert Janssen, and it could be that the second iteration is Albert Janssen 0 or Albert Janssen 1, something like that. So with this you can configure in which action the checks should be done. So maybe only on create, maybe on create update, but maybe on all the actions. I think with an exception of delete sometimes. Delete is in some scary situations, I think. But if you want to configure it, you can do edit script, and we can use that script to determine which fields are unique inside your system, or maybe connect to another system. That's also possible, of course. But previously I had to do this in the PowerShell code for the account create or the account update itself. But now we have a separate option to do this, and also, of course, increase the iteration. We have some other features and little details there, but I want to explain that in part 2, because there's some more technical things, how it works and what you can do with it more. Let me check if there are any new questions. No, there aren't any new questions. Okay, then I will continue. So like previously mentioned, we have the field. Let's say again, we have the department field, which is configured with the department name. I want to create an update, but I want to say in the create an update, I want to use that in notifications. That's pretty important. What I can do now is I can say, okay, I want to send a notification based on the department data, and normally you could do that on an account create or account update. But now we can create conditions for it if it needs to trigger. So if I go to business and I go to my custom events, I can say here, okay, I want to create a new custom event, and let's say only trigger when department is updated, as an example. I can choose my system here, so for the Azure guest accounts, and let's select the account update action. Now I can configure a condition here, and the condition here could be is updated. And I select the field department, which is inside my mapping. And here I can say, okay, I only want to trigger this event. Only trigger when the department is updated, or let's make it a little bit shorter, which is easier. Department is updated. So this will only trigger when the department is really updated. And with updated, I mean it has a previous value of, let's say, department A, and now it's because of an update account, it's switched to department B, and then this custom event is fired. And what I can do now is use this custom event inside my notifications. So if I go to notifications and I create a new notification here, I can say choose an event, and there's department is updated event. And with this I can choose different notification systems. I can choose my email, but I can also use a PowerShell notification system. And it will only trigger when the department is really updated. So that's a really nice new feature that we currently have. And currently we only have support for this for the PowerShell target system, and then the new one, of course. And in the December release, we're going to have support for it for Active Directory. So you can also use the custom events on Active Directory data. But for now, it's only for the PowerShell v2 or a new PowerShell container. And of course, normally, like I can let's have a test or something. I can use variables here, and I can say, okay, I want to use the data.department, and let me click here, so I can use my data.department as data inside my template for my notification. Because I know it's updated, because I know this notification is connected to the event department is updated. So that's a really a nice functionality where I have more control over when a notification is sent. So the starting point is still the create account, or update account, enable account, disable account, and delete account. But I can use conditionals, maybe a little bit of rules, where I can determine, is this event fired, yes or no? And what I'm going to do with it, I can determine inside my notification. And of course, I can also set two notifications for the same event. So let's say this was an email. I can create it again and a new one, and I say the same event. Department is updated, but this time I don't want to send an email, but I want to send a Twilio message or something like that, where I say, okay, I want to send a WhatsApp message or SMS message. Doesn't matter. Something like that. And again, here I can go to my configuration, and in this case, my default template, there's person.contactbusiness.phone.mobile, and here I want to use my department, data.department, so department is updated to something like that. We also have the options of differences inside the PowerShell notification system. So you can use that as a inside your PowerShell to use it inside your template or something like that to add it. And here I can say, okay, I want to send an SMS or something like that. Save it and it will work. Oh, forgot to mention the name, of course. So this is Twilio department is updated. Let's save it. So this is a really strong new functionality features we have, and the custom events, you can do a lot with it. So it is that a condition here, it's always an end situation. So that means is that all the conditions that you apply here should be met. Only then the custom event is fired. So I can add multiple condition here. So as example, I can do 2. So here I can say the department is updated, but I want to be sure that the department isn't updated to some empty value. So both of these conditions should be met. I can also do it the other way around. Like I said, I only want to send a message if it's updated, but currently it has no value, because maybe in those cases there's something strange in my HR department or something like that, where somebody has a empty department. So you can use it like that. Let me check if there are any questions. Yes, there is a question from Mike van Eck. Do you have the old and new values available in a notification? Looking at the example for the department name that changed, to be able to show both the old and new values. Yes, both of them are available. There is an object that's called differences inside the scripting. So it's a little bit due to part 2 of this webinar. But yeah, you have an object with differences, and there you see that the department is changed and the old and the new value are there. The only thing is you cannot use it. Yeah, you can use it inside the template, but it's a bit weird because you need to do a loop or something through it, and maybe make it some kind of type where you can send it to a notification system, of course. So yeah, you can put it in the template, and I think it's if we go back to the presentation and I go to my notification, let's create a new one. Let's say Twilio again. Oh, maybe I can see it here. No, not yet. So we have to select a system or an event. And you have data differences here. And this is an object with all the differences from your account. You still have to send those feature of the variables back from the connector, but that's a later talk. So yes, that's available. If you, little remark, if you use the mail notification, so the built-in mail notification, the differences are automatically resolved to an HTML table, which can be sent inside the message. So with the PowerShell notification system, it's a object, and with the email notification built in, it's an HTML table, which will be generated automatically for you. Hopefully this answers your question. And also, those are all the new features and functionalities, I think, with the PowerShell Target v2, and also a little bit related with the conditional notification events, where you can configure the rules on a functional level. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive again. So if you're not, you don't want all the details, but you think this is enough, that's okay. But we're going to talk a little bit about scripting, and if you're fine with that, please continue to stay, because I think the rest is also really interesting. But it's more technical and a little bit of a deep dive inside the new Target PowerShell system. So first off, I've talked about the mapping and all the options that we currently have here when a field is mapped, yes or no. But there's also a big difference, because all this mapped data, you still have to send it to your target system. So that's also a big difference inside your scripting. So if you go to account create action as example in your scripting, you will see that you have the account, how do we call it? Action context data. And this contains all the mapped data that I've supplied in the UI. So that means is normally I can do a loop or something like that through the data section and send it to a target system, or depending how the target system works. Also, to improve the way we can script and add scripting, is that we implied autocomplete. So you already saw it. I did action context and I can have here all the options of my scripting. So that's pretty easy to have. And we have added that on multiple levels. So on PowerShell scripting 1, but also in the mapping capabilities. I will show that a little bit later. But we have a couple of new options here. Like I said, the data is the data that we get from the mapped data. Of course, we have the dry run option. That's was normally available if you run preview. The dry run will be true. If you run in a scheduled or an enforced action, it will be false. You can use that for testing capabilities. You will get the operation. So that means is that even if it's an account create, you will get that it's an account create inside the operation, and you can use that in multiple ways. We have references, so this reference, of course, to your manager account as an example, where you can use the data of your manager account. Let me see if there are more in it. In your own account, okay, of course. Not applicable for the account create, but yeah, it is applicable for a account update. So it's also that the auto mapping helps us, but not in every situation all the data is available if it's shown here. So it could be that there are some options that are not for particular actions available, but I think we did a good job on it to keep it as good as possible for you to use. Also, there is an account correlated event, and like I said, Boolean. And that means is that the account correlated is enabled. Not if it's enabled, we have to send that back. If the account is correlated in the previous run. The account correlation configuration is in this one, and there you can see if it's enabled and which fields are selected and what values are from that field. And also we have the configuration, and the configuration is of course the system configuration where all the API keys and URLs and things like that are stored in, just like normal. Before I continue with all the details of the scripting, Basically, there are three different objects that we supply. One is the action context that contain all the data for what you need inside the action. So it's the input data of the action. And we pre-filled, of course. We have the person context. So the person context has the vault data, but also if there are differences between a person when there's an update or something like that. So you can see the differences. So what has changed? I only want to do an account update or an account trigger or something like that. If a certain field has changed, or I only want to update this field because this field in the person has changed. Something like that you can do. And we have the output context. And the output context is what you need to send back. And that's also pre-filled. So that makes it easier for you to send something back. That's also the difference in how we use this, because normally you have to do a write output with the result object and have the data inside here. You don't have to do a write output. You put everything in the output context and we just pick it up from there. So you don't have to do any more JSON transformations or things like that. You can just use the objects here in PowerShell. And also, like I said, the output context is already pre-filled. So as an example, you can update the account reference in the account update action, but it's already pre-filled with the account reference from the account create, as an example. One of the new things in the output context is the account correlated. And that means is that inside my PowerShell script, I can check if a account should be correlated. So it's already existing in the target system. And we have a little example down here. So here I can say, okay, if my correlation configuration is enabled, I want to check based on the correlation field that I've set and the value of it. I can check in the target system if that field exists. If that is the case, like here, so a correlated account is not null, then my output context, of course my account reference is updated because that account should be the account reference, but also the account correlated, sorry, it's here, it's true. And this does something magic. Because this means that you don't have to update the account, but if you set this to true, we will automatically start an update account for you after this. So this means that the account is updated and has the new latest data available and everything. So it's nice in line with the rest. But that means that you don't have to put in your update logic inside your account create script anymore, because it will be automatically fired so after your account is correlated. So that's a lot easier. Besides that, we also added a new action in the audit log, which means correlate account. So in the action log or in your audit logs, sorry, I meant audit logs, not action logs. In audit logs, you will see the correlate account action. So you can see that an account is really correlated and not created. Of course, in the future we will also do some new tricks where we will not start and create account for every person available in the business rules, but that will be in newer releases and newer features. But this will really help you to put some scripting from the create to the update, because you don't have to put in any logic for updating the account if it's correlated, because it will automatically fire. Also, like I mentioned, we have 3 different objects coming inside your script, and we chosen for 3 objects. Maybe it encapsulates all the data, and that is with a reason. If we look at the previous version of the PowerShell connector, you will get something like an account property or something like that inside your scripting, and of course you had to do some manual translation from JSON to a PowerShell object. and that was really tricky to update or migrate to a new version or to add data. Because if we added data, like we want to send the mapped data that we have here as an account property, it could be that you're already using that property inside your scripting. And then we're going to override something and then it will break. So we couldn't do that. And that's also the reason why we have chosen for a new PowerShell system instead of updating or migrating the old one, is that we saw some flaws in the chosen first option to use the JSON and also a lot more properties. Where we have 3 properties, and especially the action context and the person context, you shouldn't add any fields in your scripting. So that's really important. If you don't add any fields to it, we are certain that in the future we can add more data to these objects and your code will not break. And of course, in output context, only the data that should be sent back should be put in. So do not put extra data in it on fields that doesn't exist in the output context, because that means that it could break in the future if you are going to add new data to output context, the action context or the person context. So please be aware of that. You don't use those too often and don't create new properties inside the object. And this will help us all to have a better migration and to supply new features more easily and things like that. So the big one is that we're getting PowerShell objects instead of JSON strings that you need to transform to a PowerShell object. We have 3 major PowerShell objects that contain more data in it, and you don't have to do a write output with your data. Just fill in the output context with the data required, and then everything will work. This is not only for the account create, account update, account enable and those actions, but it also works for your permissions and your resources. So if we go to permissions as an example, you will see here, if we want to send back any permissions from a target system, we also have to do this with an output context. The same with a grant permission script. Again, output context, and we have the action context and the person context as an input. And the output context will be the output, of course. Same for resources and all those scripts that we currently have in this PowerShell. It will work like that. So please remember that. I think we have another question. Let me check again. There's another question from Mike. For how long will the old PowerShell targets be compatible? Or when should all the targets be converted to the V2 version? The old PowerShell targets will be compatible for a long while. So they will still work we don't know currently when. It could be that when we see there's a lot of people migrating to the V2, and of course we also need to update our GitHub repository to support most of the V2 systems. Then we can think of duplicating the PowerShell V2, the old PowerShell version. But please keep in mind that all the new functionality that will come, which is using a connector, target connector in this case, will only be built for the new PowerShell target system. And I think those are features that you really want. So I think in the future we will we will converting a lot of connectors, because we want to have the functionality As an example, I know for reconciliation you need the new PowerShell target system if you want to use it in PowerShell. Of course, in Active Directory there's a different story, but for PowerShell you need the new version of the PowerShell. It won't work on the old one. Also, we're going to do some migrations for the old one. So as an example, currently you use account inside the notification instead of data, but the old one will be migrated to data to be used in the notification. But that's later on, and we will do that for you. So if there is something we can migrate, we are going to do that. But yeah, the scripts are pretty difficult to migrate, of course. So I don't have a timeline yet, but it will not be anytime soon. That's certain. And if we have a timeline, we will of course communicate that, and it won't be in, let's say, in 6 months before we communicate it. So if you communicate it, it will not be in the next 6 months or something like that, and it's a longer period, I think. And of course, we can always check if all the people are migrated. If not, maybe we can make an exception or help people to convert to the new PowerShell. Okay, let's continue. So we had the input and output we discussed. The autocomplete, like I mentioned, autocomplete also works on the JavaScript mapping. So let me check if there's, let me switch this to complex, set the default. And what I have here is I can have a person here. So I have a person object and I can see in all the primary contract as example. And from the primary contract I want department, and from the department I want the display name. Also, which was a suggestion from one of you guys, is I want to have a preview functionality inside the when I do a complex mapping script, and we build it in. So here you can run a preview of this value and what it is returning. So this with the autocomplete is really nice, I think, to use, and a big improvement of the previous mapping in Active Directory. We don't have it, of course, in the PowerShell. Like I mentioned, the correlation report will not be there. And we also have some different options here that we didn't explain yet. And that's the none option here. And I can make a field that has a non-mapping, and in this case this means is that I can use that field to send back any data from my script, and I can still use it inside my notification. So this is a field that doesn't require any input from the mapping, so probably it will not go from the person full data to the target system, but it's something maybe generated by the target system, or maybe calculated in my PowerShell script, and I want to send it back to be used inside my notifications. And of course I can use this field also in my conditional custom events or notification custom events and make rules on it. So what I can do here is some nice tweaks, like say I don't know, maybe a email address is generated by your system and you want to send it in a notification. I can send it back, but I don't want to make the email address based on the mapping, but it's generated by the system. I don't know how he does that, how it works, but it's sent back on the account creator or something like that. I can use that, but with the mapping option none. So that's the reason why the mapping option there is none is there. So that's also really important and nice to have as a feature, that you can create fields inside your scripting, but you have them mapped before that, so you can use them inside our system on other places. I think we have another question. Let me switch back to the questions. Can you show how to map use account data from systems in the field step? For example, account and Microsoft Active Directory user principal name. Map use or user account data. Yeah, I think what the person in question here asks is if we can do object support in the mapping. And yeah, we have object support as previously mentioned, but we only have it one level deep. So I cannot do something like accounts.microsoft active directory .user principal name. I can only do Microsoft Active Directory .user principal name. And then in my PowerShell script, I have to put in the accounts before that if I want to use something like that. So hopefully this is an answer to your question, or if you are searching for another answer, then please ask me again, or with a different meaning, then maybe I can answer it. But I think that is what you're meaning to say or want. I meant account data from a person instead of default. So let's go back to the presentation. So let's say we have the user principal name. So let's add a field user principal name. I think normally it's complex, but I'm not going to configure it, of course, because then we're busy for a long time. But if I want to save this field inside the person account, I can just click on this and it will be saved. And of course the value is coming from the vault. It goes through the mapping. So if I press on preview here, it will say default value because that's my mapping. Then it goes to the target system, back. And if it goes back, you can also change it. So if you say, okay, the user principal name, it is sent by us, but the system is checking if the user principal name exists or something like that. It's a bit scary territory now because we have a uniqueness check where this is properly done. But let's say it sends back a different user principal name that you sent. You can update it inside the data, and then if I enable this one, it will be stored in the account data. So storing data on the person.accounts, it's pretty simple. Just enter this switch and everything will come back from your script will be saved there. Also, like I mentioned before with the notification, you can use none if you want to. So if you have some data that you want to save on the person.accounts from the target system, you can just use this one. But remember, this name is used in the person.accounts, and it can, if you want to use dots in here, you can only use one dot. So with this you can store it in the account data. Hopefully this answers your question. The other thing we currently have is of course the array type I mentioned earlier. So let's go to email addresses again and let's make this an array type. And let's go to complex. Remember that array type is only supported currently with the complex type because we have to really send an array back and not a string value. I have to send something back like this. value 1, value 2. And in the preview we'll see that it works correctly. Remember that if you're going to use scripting, these options will always be a string value. So we only support string values of an array. So if you do something like this, true, or let's say a number 5, you will see it here and it works perfectly, but it is converted to a string. So in PowerShell it will be a string value. So please remember that you don't think, oh, it's really a boolean or it's a integer or something like that. No, it's a string. So it could mean that some conditions that you use in PowerShell without converting it to a number or integer again could work differently, like higher than or something like that. So please be careful with that. So that's really important. The other thing that we also mentioned is the object. So we have the function.id and function.name. And this means that it will be as a single object function available in PowerShell. So if we have this and I go to my account and account create, the data inside it is action context.data, data.function, and it will show here as separate values, but it's function.id like this. Function is obviously a bad name because it's something else also in PowerShell, but you know what I mean. So this will get you the ID from the function, and if I want to use the whole object, I can do it like this. Then I will get the whole object with an ID and a name inside it with the values. So that's also pretty easy, I think, to use, but again, only one level deep. So only one dot is available. Also, you will see that. So if you create something new, let's say, let's create a new field, and let's say I want to have test.test1. It doesn't work. It will stop you from creating it. I think we handled almost everything from the PowerShell connector. Some use cases, of course, and especially using the field and with the mapping type none, you can do some nice tricks with sending the data back to the custom events and how to trigger or when to trigger a notification. Because you can create some variable in PowerShell or do some calculations based on multiple fields and determine if a value has to be yes or no or something like that, or a particular value of a field, and send it back to the custom events based on the mapping none and the fields, and just create a custom event here, say Azure guest, and then I don't know, in account create. And we had earlier we had the department field. Well, let's use a new username now, and you can do something like equals or contains to check if this value, if the username has this certain value. But you can also use a calculated field inside PowerShell to determine if it has a value, a certain value in it, or does it have a value, or even if it's updated based on the data. Maybe that's also good to show. The updated is really important to know that if you go to account updated, you will see that we have a account and a previous account, and we send it back inside the data as data and previous data. And this determines if there are any differences in account, and therefore if the field is updated yes or no. So please keep in mind that if the is updated in the conditional event isn't working, please check if there are any differences between the data and the previous data in your output context. If not, it will not work. Also good to know is a normal update account event is not fired or executed when there are no differences between those two. But with the custom event it is, because there we say, okay, you can make your own rules when to fire something, and it should not only based on the differences of those two. So with a custom event you can say, okay, I want to always send a update when the department is sales, as an example. And it shouldn't have to change the department, but if the department is sales, I want to send a notification. It is possible. But the previous one, it wasn't, because only a account update event in the notification will be fired when there was a difference between the data and the previous data. So this will be more important, I think, for the new PowerShell, because we have new functionalities based on the conditional notification events on this. So please be aware of that. I think those are all the details of the new PowerShell system, and also the changes. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot the uniqueness check, of course. Sorry, my mistake. The uniqueness check. It works a little bit like the Active Directory external uniqueness check, where we can just do a check on the system based on any fields that are mapped. And in this case, I want to check, as an example, on the username and external ID. I can check them in my target system. If they are not unique, I have to send back the fields that are not unique, or should be in the next iteration. That's also a little bit of difference, because in Active Directory we have the sync iteration for fields, and actually you have to manage it here by yourself, because that means if I want to keep those fields in sync, I have to send back both of these fields if one isn't unique. So with this you have more control of what fields you've synced and what fields you don't want to sync. Because if you say, okay, I have 3 fields, let's say here, as example, the user principal name, I'm going to check them, and I want to have the user principal name and the username, I want to have them synced. So if one of them are not unique, then send both of these back. But if the external ID is unique, no problem, I will leave that in the iteration I would like, if the first one is free. So with this, I have the username and user principal name synced with the same iteration, because if one of them is not unique, I send them back, and it will always be the same iteration. Another thing which is unique in this feature is that we can send back an iteration number. What we could do is, let's say in the old situation we had 99 iterations. With this there's a limitation on 50. But what I can do is, in my first iteration, if it's not unique, I can search in the system what is the next unique value and just send it back as output.iteration, like this. Or I can do it more randomly or something like that. And that's also the number which is a input inside the mapping. So with this we support higher numbers of iteration checking, but also you can do something like generate a unique number. If it's not unique, generate a new unique number, or you can do it here and send it back or something like that. And there are multiple options here where you can use it. So this is a nice new feature, I think, that helps in some scenarios where we couldn't do it with the old external uniqueness check. So please keep in mind, it works a little bit like that, but there are some differences in how to use it. And especially with the synchronization of fields, you have to do it in your scripting to keep it synchronized. And you can search for the next best value and send it back for your mapping to help, so you don't have to do a lot of round trips, which requires more time, and of course for us more performance and things like that. Sorry, I think those are all the features I want to address in this webinar. Let me check again if there are any questions. No, I don't see any new questions. So then I would like to thank you. Sorry, because it was a little bit dark in my webcam, but I would like to thank you for listening and watching this webinar. If you like this setup more, where we go more into depth into a bigger feature, and maybe not each month, but maybe once or 3 months, or when the feature is released, please let us know in the comment if you like that more than the previous webinars, and we're going to think about if we want to change this, yes or no. But please give us your feedback. If you have any other questions, you can also put it in the comments or contact our support department. And of course, if you have any feedback, you can put it on roadmap.helloid.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a webinar or a product release video or any other information that we have on HelloID. So thank you for watching.